Ah. 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 Breathe. Ah. Ah. The paradox is inescapable. The dream is inescapable. The ego is inescapable. It's all the same thing. The paradox is an idea. I believe that I'm separate from God, although that's clearly impossible if God is everything. Which beggars the question, what is God? Which has to come as your own experience in order to answer that question. Because otherwise you're going to attempt to answer the question of what is God based on what is not God, which of course again is separation. And separation from God is clearly impossible if God is everything. And you find yourself again and again and again back in the paradox, back in the place of impossibility. But you can't transcend the impossibility with a spiritual concept saying, oh, the world doesn't exist, it's just a dream, it doesn't matter. Because here you are, you still find yourself here. In this impossible place of bodies, of form, of association with form, of symbols, which represent the paradox, essentially, that they represent nothing else. Christ consciousness, Christ vision, or Buddha consciousness, or Krishna consciousness looks beyond the symbols. Sees what is not there, sees what can't be seen with the body's eyes perceptively. It's a recognition that although I seem to see arms and legs and people and trees and things, none of these things can actually be real. If God is spirit and God creates in its own likeness, and Jesus tells me, I am spirit, or you are the spirit, not the flesh, that's what it is that I am, that God created me in its own image as, then what is the body? Jesus says in the Course, the body is a symbol, a tiny wall, a veil made to keep separate what is impossible to keep separate, like an idea of myself and God's self as being the same self, as if there was a me and a God. And you get right down to the funny, the conundrum of it all is that, like sitting here now, I am God, telling myself that there's a possibility that I'm not that, knowing that I am that. Like it's ridiculous, you know. But the appearance of the form, the appearance of the physical nature of life continues to exist until the purification of the mind has reached its zenith point where the potential for not that has been exhausted or healed or atoned for. Which is why the sole responsibility of the miracle worker, if you're reading A Course in Miracles, you are a miracle worker. The sole responsibility for the miracle worker is to keep the finger on the nose, to accept atonement at one-ment for myself. I had a very nice evening last night. I'll just dabble in time for a second. Yesterday, back in the past, as an idea. Up at the Standing Stones, I was invited by a small group of people to go up there and participate in their full moon celebration. I'd expressed an interest to get to know the nature of the town I live in, which I think when you move to a new place, there's always an energetic signature or an energetic presence of the collective that seems to prevail. Like if you go to a city, the collective energy of a city, let's say, tends to be very busy, academically oriented, and all of this sort of thing in a general sense. And you can feel that. When you go to a very small country town, you can feel how relaxed it is in comparison. And then within that, and these are all ideas in my own mind, but within that you have a particular vibe. Like if there was let's say in America, I remember reading a book, and I don't know if there's a town there, a place called Wounded Knee, where apparently thousands of Indians were massacred by settlers or something, or there was a war or something at Wounded Knee. I remember it was many, many years ago when my blood brother Joey was introduced. He was a Navajo man, introducing me to his culture, what he knew of it. He was a Western educated man, but he was trying to rediscover his people's culture as well. And if you move to a town like that where such an atrocity or such a barbaric act had occurred, it would stain the consciousness of the town as a memory, as a historic marker. And you would feel that ripple if you are attuned to your higher alignment. How do you talk about it? If you are attuned to your sense of self in a way that is including in and taking responsibility for where, what, how, why, and when of the particulars of the potential for potential for separation to have even existed, even as a dream, you would feel it. I've often met people in the last 30 odd years that are very sensitive, empathic, if you like, who can, in a certain sense, energetically place themselves in certain locations and times mentally and become very emotionally affected by that. I seem to be less emotionally affected by things these days, almost to the point of not feeling anything at all, as if somebody's just reading me a story that I know is not true, which actually is the case, but it's also the case. So last night I went up to the Stones, and there was some drumming going on, and people looking at the Standing Stones, waiting for the full moon, and there was John was up there, this chap I've just met, giving a talk. He's one of the curators of the Standing Stones. I don't know what a curator does, but talking about things to the tourists and other people that were walking around. But I was sitting with the people drumming, and we had no use for symbols. We had no use for the words, no use for the language. There was a mutual understanding. There was an unwritten understanding of the silence and allowing the rhythm and the beat of the drumming and whatever else was going on to be perfect, and we were simply joining in as our hearts felt to do so. And nothing needed to be said. And I thought that was a lovely reflection. But sometimes you'll go to places and you'll feel uncomfortable. I felt anything but uncomfortable last night. But I remember if I went back 30, 40 years, I couldn't go anywhere without feeling uncomfortable, like a fish out of water. I've always felt like I didn't belong, like I didn't fit in, like there was something wrong with me or something wrong with the world. But that's done a big 360 now, and I don't go out often. I don't get invited to many things, and even if I did, I more than likely wouldn't go. I'm quite content with my own company. The last 6 years, I suppose, I've been living alone, and I'm quite happy whether I'm living alone or whether there are people with me. It doesn't bother me either way, but generally I find myself in a physical sense anyway by myself, and that's fine. The paradox is unavoidable. I was going to make this video about how will the world end. I started to make a video before about how will the world end, and I deleted it. I got about 15, 16 minutes in and ran out of content. The waters went dry. There was really nothing to say. I mean, in the Course it says, how can a world apart from God even exist? So therefore, how can it end? And you have to look at that, and it's like, oh, I'm right back at the paradox. But also, Jesus does say in the Course, when he's talking about learning to collapse time, which is what the mind training is teaching, he does say, of course, that the end can be as far away from you now as the beginning is. You know, something along those, they're not his exact words, but, you know, hundreds of millions of years, billions of years. And so you look at that idea and it's like, oh my God, I don't want to keep incarnating for all of that. Even if I don't remember it, I still don't want to. I'm just gonna take a vote of confidence in myself for future me and know that future me wouldn't want that either. Not that it's really in the future, it's all here and now, like all time's happening all at once, but it seems to be in the future. So the paradox is inescapable. And I guess where I'm trying to get with that is you're learning not to try and escape it, but simply to accept it, accept the paradox. Otherwise, the mind looks for a spiritual premise under which to base its astral escape from the cause and effect nature of its relationships, and it will convince itself that a conceptual or astral departure from having to recognize the ills and the pains of everyday life is worthwhile and worthy and what's meant to be occurring, because it's spiritual, isn't it? And no, that's not what's meant to be occurring. This is a journey into fear, not away from it, and we're not trying to transcend it. So every time you find yourself in a conundrum and you realize, hang on a minute, there is no world, which is the baseline for my acumen here, my mental operation within the frame of my spiritual discipline, then there's work to do. Every time I find myself beset by the paradox, there's work to do. I want to look at that paradox and see where it is that, although it's not real, I still seem to find it real. Why do I still seem to find it real here? What is the block? What is the thing I'm attached to, and the desire or the longing or the want or the need or the hope or the false belief or the dream, you know? Where is it? What is it that's attached? And to look at that. I think it was Adi Shankara who said, no, it wasn't, it might be Aurobindo. Anyway, but if you don't break your ropes whilst you're on earth, do you think the ghosts are going to do it afterwards? You'll just find yourself back here. You'll go through the bardo and you'll come back here. The bardo being that transition place in consciousness between, it's like a bungee rope. You can't go to the afterlife if you've still got a bungee rope attached to this life. That's probably a good way to look at the bardo. So we're here to break our ropes. We're here to cut our bungees. And that, of course, occurs through forgiveness. Can what has no beginning really have an end? It's a hell of a statement, isn't it? You sit here and you look around, you touch things and you feel your own, can what has no beginning really have an end? How can I not exist? And you look at it and you, how can this not be real? How is this fake? How is this, right? And you look at it and you come to the realization, everything is mind. Everything is mind. It's like when you put goggles on for virtual reality these days, you can go to the Apple store and try some on, you know, and I recommend, absolutely, if you have not done that, go and do it. And you will see, or even PlayStation, you know, you can buy the ones that go on and you're in the other land, in the different dimension. And to the sensory perceptions that you have within that framework, it's completely real. And if you're playing the game for a while or you're in the Apple store for a while looking around, it begins to take over your psyche in a way where you're convinced, or it's not that you're convinced, you don't even question what's going on because you're using and interacting with it in a way where you actually forget the outside world. You forget, you're absorbed. And that's what this is, absorption. You're absorbed in the illusion of it. And wants and needs and desires and hopes and dreams and fulfillment of fantasies and things like that are the things that keep you absorbed. I came to a point in my own storyline where I no longer was absorbed with any of it and I wanted out, and regardless. And I was given out. I was awoke from the dream. I realized that this didn't exist and it was a complete devastation to my self-identity. I realized there can't possibly be a Dave. I didn't realize that conceptually because I read it in a book or whatever. I realized that because it just dawned on me. How is it even possible? And I found myself between this rock and a hard place with the paradox. And that started the journey down that spiral into the dark night of my soul, and where I didn't want to exist. I didn't want to exist as Dave without the truth. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know God. I wanted to be helpful to others who I saw like me in the dream, who were addicted at that time to drugs, alcohol, and everything else. And, you know, I saw the suffering of the world. I saw the struggles. I saw the pain and the pointlessness and the meaninglessness of life without love. And it was a hard lesson to learn that there is no love in the world. There is no love in the world. There's no love between people, but there is love within you. The love that seems to exist between people is symbolic love. It's not actual love. It's a substitute. It's what we call love as opposed to what we think is not love. And that's symbolic and symbolic. These things symbolize love. These things symbolize not love. But of course, it's all love. But in this world, love appears in lesson form. It shows up as symbols. It shows up as lessons, universal lessons, to help us to remember that love is within, love is within, love is within. And until I learn to love myself, until I know what I am as love, I can't connect with anyone else on that level, on a true love level. I can't connect with anyone else on a level where, unless that person also has had profound shift in consciousness to realize the nature of love being unconditional. Love is not special. There's not a love for this person and not a love for that person. I either love everyone equally as my brother in Christ, or I'm loving a body. And bodies get old and wrinkly and smelly and they're not much fun. And it was funny because last night up at the Stones, I had a woman touch my hand. We were sitting side by side in this drumming, and she put her hand on my hand. And as a symbol, I could give that a meaning, you know, like, why did she do that? she was having fun drumming, and we were drumming together, and there was other people around, but I took it as a sign of endearment and affection because she was enjoying the drumming. But of course, if I wanted to read deeper into those signs and symbols, like you can always say, well, is this person trying to get my attention? And the mind wanders off into another story. And then that story, of course, as soon as you entertain a story, you're lost in it, and it becomes your reality for a moment until you realize there's nothing going on here because there is no world. Luckily for me, I realized that in that instant, but I have no real interest to entertain stories and see where those stories lead. Hansel and Gretel, get lost in the woods, lost in the woods of separation. The temptations of the world are there every time you open your eyes. Every time I open my eyes, breathe in through my nose, I can smell the world, I can hear it through these ears. And the eye that is hearing and smelling and seeing and everything is the true eye, but the orientation of the true eye is false. Like mind is whole. There's not consciousness as separated from the whole. Consciousness is still part of mind. However, it's a part of mind that has fallen down an abyss, let's say, or taken on board it's had a bump on the head. Taken on board a purpose that is unlike reality in every way. And so it has to be retrained. It cannot be transcended. You may have a brief experience of transcending the conscious level, but then you will find yourself back within the framework of the conscious level to do the work of healing, to do the work of forgiveness, atonement, bringing that conscious mind to its peaceful zenith, to its peaceful highest point, so that you have inner peace on a daily basis, no longer needing to call inner peace into being again every time you get upset about something. You will simply cease to be upset about anything. You will simply cease to be unconcerned about anything because you're learning to let go. You're learning to trust God. If you truly trust God, if you're 100% dependent on God, what are you going to worry about in the world? Nothing. Everything becomes the divine will of God. I just let God be God and me be whatever it is that this thing that I think I am is, right? Including the body in, being inclusive of all things about the body, etc. Until finally, by my allowance to let God lead and me take the second place and me follow, I will be led back out of the illusion of separation from God to a place where there are no longer any paradox moments where I seem to be something separate from God, because I will no longer be seeing myself that way. I still do have the occasional paradox moments, I can tell you, but they're nowhere near as profound and horrifying and confronting as they were when I first started this journey. They're more like just little moments of laughing at myself. There hasn't been any big ones for a long time. The best way to find the big ones, though, is to be in a relationship with someone, or if you already are in a relationship, to repurpose that relationship for healing. And the purpose of all relationships is teaching and learning until you reach the point within the relationship where the equilibrium becomes stable, the teaching and learning equilibrium becomes stable, and you realize that you no longer need each other as teachers, as learners. And then you can move on and enter into other relationships with other people and help them to bring their equilibrium up. But the one thing that I would be very cautious against, Jesus says in the Course, anything you want in the world can and will hurt you. Just be sure that if you are thinking of entering into a relationship with another person, another body, I'm not going to tell you don't do that, because it's the best way to bring up your junk. But make sure that you have a clear understanding of the purpose of the relationship before you enter into it. Because if you enter into a relationship with a dead thing, with a dream figure that has no clue about awakening, no intention on learning to heal or be healed, etc., 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 you're both going to be going in diametrically opposed directions from the get-go. You're not even going to be trying to work towards a single point, even though from time to time one of you or the other of you is going to be getting it wrong, and you're going, but that is the point of healing. But if you're diametrically opposed from the beginning, then what's the point really? Because one of you, let's say me, I've already made the decision, that's not the way I want to go. I want to go towards the light now. I've made a decision to repent in my life, to turn around in my life, which is what repent means, turn around, and head back to the light, head into the light rather than away from it, back to unity rather than into further experiences of separation. And we have this, this is just a helpful, this one's been bouncing around the truck for a while, it's a bit worn out, but I mean, if two people in a relationship can read this little book, let's say, which is the reviews, essentially the reviews of the first 50 lessons of A Course in Miracles, but if you're reading A Course in Miracles together, or you can read these lessons and you're like, yep, I get that, then that would be reasonable grounds upon which to proceed. But you're always going to be referring to these lessons. You're always going to be picking up the big book of the Course and putting your finger on your nose every time something comes up, every time all your rubbish comes up in the relationship, which shows up as arguments and disagreements and stress and all of the things that test a relationship. Anything other than harmony and peace and love. Well, that's about it. I feel like this video's, people tell me they always get plenty of stuff out of my videos, but I feel like this one's, I feel like something's occurred in my mind since last night. Something's shifted, and the sands of that shifting are still under my feet. The shifting sands of, it hasn't quite settled yet. So if this video feels a little bit here and there, which is how it feels to me in the making of it, that's why, which is interesting enough, I guess. There has to come a point when, even within my own association, the need to make these videos is complete, because these videos still fall within the framework of teaching and learning, and I like to make them because you guys asked me to keep making them. Yet at the same time, I'm feeling the withdrawal. Maybe withdrawal's not the right word. I'm feeling it's like a tide going out. I guess that's like a withdrawal. It feels like the need to make them is kind of not as urgent as it was. And I remember I had a bit of a frenzy making these videos after the one that went viral. It had 350,000 views, and a whole lot of people came to my channel and came to the awareness that there was even a book called A Course in Miracles because of that one video. And I set about to make subsequent videos to support that one for those of you who were new to the course and might have needed that help. But of course, there's probably now 550, maybe even more videos on my channel, which if you would share those videos somehow, if we can get them out, ideas are increased by sharing. And the more ideas, the more of this technology, the more of this understanding that gets out, the better, because it's helpful. It helps to collapse time across the board, the time of suffering. I like the visual that I have right now of the movie The Matrix, where everybody's in those little red pods, dreaming that they're in the Matrix. They're hooked up to the mainframe computer. So what happens when you share these videos, what happens when you talk about this stuff with your friends, is everybody in those pods begins to kick. It's like a baby, in the womb, and it's nearly time for that rebirth. But if we don't share them, if we don't share these videos, if we don't share this information, then everybody just lays there like asleep in the dream. At least when you have a spiritual perspective on life, you become awake in the dream, and then you want to go further from that through your determination to awaken from the dream. And you won't want to come back. I didn't want to come back. All right, that's it. I love you. And down below there'll be the contact for Tyna, Tyna. Oops. She has the link. She can give you the link for the Zoom meetings. So if you followed the video to the end and you'd like to be part of our Zoom meetings, they're pretty random, our Zoom meetings. They tend to sort of take a different form here and there from week to week, and it's full participation, cameras on. So they can be confronting, or they can be comforting. They can be all sorts of things. They're designed to bring about, like these videos, they're designed to bring about in a more intimate way a greater participation with your own process. So if you're interested in healing, if you really are interested in doing the work, the shadow work, the mirror work, all that sort of stuff, and accepting atonement, they are invaluable. Because the whole point of this is to have a shift in consciousness. The whole point is not to end up sitting here listening to my videos forever, but to actually be in a frame of mind wherein you're pushing the limit of your own association in the world and with the world, so that hopefully one day you'll be able to start making videos or painting or writing poetry or something based on your awakening, having had a shift in consciousness, which has shown you that the world is not real. And once that becomes the collective perspective, once that becomes mainstream, which it is, it's starting to permeate now out into the mainstream, then the necessity for the matrix as a framework to support further free will inquiry into the possibility of separation from God doesn't need to exist. it gets collapsed. It collapses in on itself. Alpha and Omega, boom, to the here and the now. And which has already actually occurred. So we just find ourselves back within the dream, or in the dream that is already over, learning how to speed up the overness of it through the insertion of a realization that, one, it's not true, and two, that we can bring that to our own terminal point by refusing to participate in the dream of death and representing through our repurposing of our lives here the truth of ourselves as unconditional love. Because it is the truth of yourself whether you remember it or not. I love you.